So thank you all for being here. My travels to South Africa were something that kind of sat with me so deeply that I wasn't even sure how I would go about sharing this event, this journey with you all. And to do it in full would have taken us the 2 weeks that I was there. So what I've decided to do today is to share with you a couple of my big reflections. And I'm realizing I'm missing my little notebook, Steve. It's in my bag in my office, please. It's okay, you have a few minutes before I need it, but so the guy that just left, and those of you who are here, I'm looking at my screen right now, who are joining us through the recording, I thank you for wanting to see this as well. So the picture that I chose here is there's some space over here. We might need to get 2 chairs.
And there's a bench. Well, and then I can the chair in the back. I can climb through. You can't.
Yeah, you want to see Anne.
I would have room for the one more back. Thank you. Okay. And now where you have table.
That was strategic.
Jim's supposed to be coming through, but he's
Okay.
in the sacristy.
Okay. Well, we have more chairs. There's some more space up front here. You guys can just keep getting closer and closer to me. I'm not that scary.
Let's see, we have one back here.
And you have one back there too.
Yeah.
Okay. So when people come in, do that whole little raise hand thing that lets people know. I decided to start my presentation with this quilt art piece that I saw at the Constitutional Court building called Freedom. It was formerly the Freedom Quilt, and it references the biblical story of the waters of Bethesda, and thank you, and the stirring of those waters. And so it starts with Nelson Mandela in the center, and those waters ripple out. And what they say about it is that the first outward ripple represents the coming of democracy in 1994. The second, the indigenous people learning about and reclaiming their Bushman origins and mythology. And the third, the artists who created this, spreading their culture through storytelling in light of the wider ongoing effects of constitutional democracy. And what I thought was interesting about this piece is that it was originally created in 2007, but in 2023, when they restored it, they decided that they wanted to change some things. They thought that the original piece was overly optimistic in what happened in the democracy there. And so they wanted to change it to reflect how they actually saw the things happening there. And I felt that that represented well my experience of being there. So today we'll talk a little bit about the context of where I was, this idea of multiple level witness that I kind of had an epiphany aha moment about, and the theological concept of Ubuntu. So our context is, yes. Would love to, and no. Or at least I don't know how to. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So I was in Africa, and South Africa is at the very southern tip of Africa, and we were in 2 locations. The first is the bottom part here in Cape Town and Hermanus at the most southern tip, and then way up here in Johannesburg and Pretoria, which is the legal center and where the president sits. And then over here is where we had a 2-day game drive in Pilanesberg. I was there to learn from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, affectionately known as the Arch, his life and legacy. And this particular picture is at a place called the Long Walk to Freedom. And this statue behind it are statues going all the way back to statues of the original inhabitants of South Africa, the Khoi and the San, the Khoisan. And then moving forward, the Long Walk to Freedom are each of these people walking into and fighting for the freedom of their people from the beginning.
I like that. Wow.
And that is Table Mountain in the background, which is a prominent spot in Cape Town. The Arch was in high school when apartheid was legalized. He wanted to be a doctor, but his family couldn't afford that. And so guided by an Anglican priest friend and mentor to him, Father Trevor Huddleston, he became a priest in the South African Anglican Church, part of the Anglican Communion of which we are also a part. He believes strongly that the church should be in the public square as a voice of Christian witness to the oppressed. He opposed partisanship and forbid priests from registering or being a card-carrying member of one side or the other. And he also preached nonviolence. But I think an interesting thing about how he says that about nonviolence, you should do nonviolence vigorously. And so if you think about that, it means we don't stay quiet. We're not going to get in, we're not going to fight to start it, but we will respond. He was deeply spiritual and prayerful. This is him walking the labyrinth outside the cathedral in Cape Town. He spent hours in prayer every day, and he believed that his relationship with God was so core to who he was and what he was to do as a witness in the world that God would guide him in truth and in using his voice. So that centering of prayer every day was vital to his ministry. He was also very joyful and humorous and had an amazing smile. This sculpture of him swinging from a chandelier is in the Truth to Power exhibition in Cape Town. And it was a surprise for us after going through the exhibition of his life and legacy. And after going through such a very serious museum, which was the first thing we did when we got there, to end with this as our surprise, told us a little bit of something about the Arch and who he was and how he engaged with the world and with people. It was his relationship with God, his relationship with people that mattered. So let's talk a little bit about apartheid, which is very important in the context of what we're talking about here. Apartheid comes from the Afrikaans word of separateness or apartheid. So you can kind of hear where that comes from. Afrikaans is one of the 11 languages, official languages in South Africa, and it is kind of a blending of the Dutch language and the indigenous languages of the people who live there. A little bit of background. In 1962, the Dutch East Indian Company, the VOC, came in needing, and they found it as they were creating their trade route to go around Africa. And they are the ones who colonized South Africa. We often think of countries colonizing. This was a company that colonized a place. And so they came in first. In 1975, Great Britain came in, and there are a bunch of wars called the Boer Wars that go in and out of this. But eventually Great Britain takes control, and from then until 1961. In 1948, the National Party won the general election, which started the legalization of apartheid. There was already some discrimination and separateness happening before, but with this, with the National Party coming into power, it was now legalized. One of the first things happened, the Registration Act. It required all people carried, and they separated them into 3 categories. There was the whites, and that was at the top, if you can think about it that way. Bottom were the blacks, and in between were, quote, the colors. And the colored people are people who were from India or who were from mixed race. One thing to point out is right around this time, also interracial marriage was outlawed, and interracial intercourse was also outlawed. So the mixed race people were also in the middle. And this followed not only in society, but this separation also happened all the way at the level of prison systems, where the white people would have the most amount of things, the most amount of food. They would have clothing that would keep them warm in the winter, where the black folks would have shorts in the winter still, and bedding that was didn't have as much fluff in it. Nelson Mandela and Gandhi both were in the same prison. Gandhi, being of Indian origin, could wear pants, where Nelson Mandela would have been wearing shorts. They were there at different times, but that was kind of eye-opening to me. In 1953, the Bantu Education Act went into place, and this designated how students were taught. And again, we have this tiered system of who received what kind of education. The point of this was to make sure the Black people knew their place, and that the children were being educated to know who they were in society and what role they would play in society as subservient to the white people. In 1974, a language decree went into place that that made it all the schools have to be taught in Afrikaans or in English. This became a problem because many of the Black students and their teachers did not know Afrikaans or English. And so this became a problem later on that I'll talk about in just a moment. Between the time of 1960 and 1983, this is when we see the mass evictions across South Africa, as Black folks were moved out of their homes, out of their areas where they were living, into what we know as the townships. These townships were located far outside of the city center. This made it difficult for them to get in, to access services, to access jobs. And so you can tell right there that just by moving them out, they're creating this system in which the Black folks and the colored folks had difficulty with any mobility, getting jobs, and getting resources. And then June 16, 1976 was the Soweto student uprising. There had been protests during this time. Students were constantly walking out of school protesting the language decree that had been put in place because they didn't know the language that they were being taught in. But on this day, something changed. The police decided to open fire with live ammunition. And a 12-year-old boy, Hector Peterson, was killed in this uprising. And that became the point at which apartheid became known across the world. The image, which you can see in the background of this photo at Hector Peterson Square in Soweto, come on in, shows a boy carrying Hector and his sister walking beside them. And this was the image that allowed the world to know what was going on. And then in 1994, the first Democratic president, Dr. Nelson Mandela, was elected, officially ending apartheid. One of the things that President Nelson Mandela did was to immediately create the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to which he appointed Archbishop Desmond Tutu to be the chair of that commission. They believe the commission is necessary exercise to enable South Africans to come to terms with their past on a morally accepted basis and to advance the cause of reconciliation. During the course of the TRC hearings, 22,000 victims were identified in the course of their investigations and hearings. And this is a board of every single one of those names listed in the Truth to Power exhibition in Cape Town. The commission had 3 specific tasks. First, to discover the causes and nature of gross violations between 1960 and 1994, to propose reparations and measures to help rehabilitate victims, and to grant amnesty to those who fully disclose politically motivated crimes. Unfortunately, this process did not happen. In the end, the TRC worked to promote but did not achieve reconciliation. Desmond Tutu voiced his sadness over the reluctance of white leaders to urge their followers to respond with the generosity of spirit shown by the victims of apartheid. So in the end, amnesty hearings did reveal new details of the atrocities committed, and that's how the 22,000 victims were identified. But proposals for reparations and payments were never fully implemented. And those who failed to get amnesty were never persecuted. There were 300 cases that were referred for prosecution. By 2019, only 1 prosecution had been completed, and only 37 were still actively being investigated. And we got to hear some of these hearings in the Apartheid Museum. And one of the hard things I will say for me is listening to people speak of these atrocities and know that they were going to get amnesty for telling the truth. I had a hard time with that because I heard some horrible things that people said. And I will say that some of them did not seem like they were bothered at all. And that deeply hurt me, knowing that all they had to do was tell the truth, and they got amnesty, even if they had no feeling, remorse for it at all. And that was really hard for me, I have to admit. So apartheid as a legal and government imposed system is over, but the societal and cultural effects remain. We can see this in the townships that still exist. They now have power and water services with laws created starting in 1994 under the new democratic government. And what that looks like for us walking through, the first thing I saw was the central place where water was. And that I saw women there washing their clothes, getting water to take it someplace, or kind of washing up. The other thing we had to do, there's just that one central place for water. The power comes in, but really to get it to people's homes, which look like these corrugated tin structures, the folks there have to wire it themselves. Now think about how dangerous that is. And as we walked through the township, we had to be careful to step over the power lines. Some of the, because if there was any break in the rubber that's around them, then we could be electrocuted. And there was water on the ground as well. So, and you would see lots of power lines going through. If the government comes in and sees all these power lines, they'll cut it because that's dangerous. And they'll just line it all back up because they need power in their homes. Because these townships still exist, access to jobs, services, and any upward movement is still almost impossible for Blacks, very challenging for those who are considered colored, because they still have not gotten the economic opportunities for them to have the money to move into what would be called white neighborhoods, because they can't afford those homes. They're still not getting the jobs that the white folks have. So these kind of systems, even though the legal part is gone, the structure, the system still exists. This is a picture of Johannesburg, down in the central part of Johannesburg. Well, I will say that when we arrived, the day we arrived, the mayor resigned as mayor. 3 days later, when we left, the 10th mayor in 3 years took office. It's downtown, kind of, it's a mess. Street lights don't work. People are walking everywhere. Cars are going wherever they can just to get through. This image is through the front of our van, and we had to go through all of what you see ahead. We also would get stopped multiple times when we were coming in and out of the central part of Johannesburg. On the highways, they stop people to check for IDs and make sure that everything's safe in the vehicles. So there's still a lot of systemic problems, especially in a city center like Johannesburg. I will say outside Johannesburg and in New Johannesburg, it's gorgeous. It's nice homes, beautiful malls and places to eat and hotels. So, you know, as you move out from the city center, they have it look much nicer.
Betsy, does the mayor still then govern over that outer nicer area, or just the central?
That's a really good question, Beth. I actually don't know how far there yes, thank you, the jurisdiction, that was the word I was looking for. The jurisdiction goes beyond that. It's like the New Johannesburg is still considered Johannesburg. They built that for the World Cup. Could that be right? Yeah. They built that for the World Cup. Well, they needed that. I mean, think about what they're trying to show off there. So it looks really nice. So I would assume that the mayor has some control over that, but I'm not sure how much. So my struggle, I think very naively, I wanted to go see a place where something bad happened. And then this Truth and Reconciliation came into place and everything was good. And I didn't see that. And I struggled with that my entire time there. And I want to read to you my journal entry that I wrote on the last day of my trip. Over the last 2 weeks, we have journeyed through the history of colonization, apartheid, and democracy. I struggled with the idea that somehow the struggle should be over, but have come to realize we are always and will always be working towards justice. We are always evolving and becoming God's beloved community as we learn and bear witness to what God reveals to us. There is no easy fix that will solve the problems so that we can move on. That fix belongs to one and one alone, God. Jesus came and walked with his people, learned with his people, wept, struggled. He didn't fix anything. Those in power still killed him. While journeying with us, however, Jesus did have impact. He demonstrated what it was to speak truth to power. His words continue on to inspire us to carry our own crosses and to follow in his way. And this is also when I had this thought of multiple level witness and how we move on and how we go about creating beloved community. even when we know things aren't right yet. So our game driver, Jared, said to us on our first day, you're on a game drive with me right now, and I'm going to tell you what I know, what I have observed, what I have read about, and how I understand what we're seeing in this land. If you go on a game drive with another guide, you might hear something different. And that's because they have seen something different. They have witnessed something different. They have read a different book than I have. And so we're constantly, from all these different angles, all seeking the truth, all gaining truth, but seeing it from different perspectives. And it reminded me of the story of the elephant and the people blindfolded around the elephant, meant to describe, what do you feel? And the person from the behind is saying, oh, I feel like a tree. You know, I'm feeling something that feels like a tree. And the front is like, oh, I feel something wiggly. They're all seeing truth. They're all witnessing truth and experiencing truth. But how they describe it is different. And we need all of that to help us really understand what's going on in the world. And I saw that as multiple level witness. So we saw a hot air balloon, and I thought, oh, the hot air balloon, that's up at the top. That's looking down and seeing this big, vast view of what's going on. And then there's the view of me taking the picture of the giraffe, if you can even see the giraffe in that picture. In that scene, I'm standing back and seeing it from this angle. And then there is the weeds, where we have to get into the weeds to be able to see what might otherwise be hidden. So we're going to start with the multi-level witness in the bird's eye view. In this area, we can see the systems at play. We can get theoretical, theological, and we can start thinking about programs that might make a difference. So here we are at Groot Kerk, which is the Dutch Reformed Church, where the biblical justification for apartheid was preached. You can see the pulpit in the background here. That is where apartheid was preached as a theological truth. The folks gathered here are pastors, priests, theologians, activists, artists, and researchers grappling with the past and how to understand it today, and what to do to make sense of today and change tomorrow. We here can relate to these kinds of discussions in the United States when we grapple with the truth of our colonized past, slavery, and the ongoing systems of oppression that still mean that people today do not have the economic, it's my word, opportunities, thank you, that other folks do. This is where we can ask questions of where our curriculum or even our preaching upholds the oppression and the dominant structure and culture. Here we are at the Luckhoff School. This is Wilhelm Verwoerd. His grandfather, Hendrik Verwoerd, was the architect of apartheid. And so this man grapples every day with the fact of what his grandfather preached and stood for and actually enacted in South Africa. And one of the things that I think we often struggle with, me and all of us here in the United States, is the idea of white shame. We all know this term. Wilhelm has spent his life grappling with this. He said about this, we can't change our ethnic identity or the system in which we were raised. The question is, what will we do about it? And what will we do with that? His work is in the Center for the Study of the Afterlife of Violence and the Reparative Quest. It is toward this end and looking at the ongoing life after systemic transgenerational trauma. That is a mouthful of what he's trying to accomplish there through Stellenbosch University. And now we have the spectator looking straight on the observations, the data collection, and the questions. The first place is Zwingli, and that was the township that we visited and walked through. I did have opportunity to talk with people there, but a lot of that was just observation and just, walking through and looking on and seeing what kids were doing as they went to school or how people lived their lives, the life of that community. And it was loud there, but in a most beautiful way. It was loud there. The community was so strong and beautiful. The next picture is the Bocop district with its colorful houses. And there are different reasons of why they're colorful. One is that when they were leased, they had to all be white. And when that law went away, they wanted to be colorful to celebrate their freedom. That's just one of the stories that I heard. What I thought was interesting being there was the mosques all rang. They're not coordinated, and there are many mosques in this area. So one mosque would go off, and then another mosque would go off, and then another mosque would go off. And so I think the Islam people there have to listen for their mosque rings. And this is Regina Mundi Church that we visited. Regina Mundi was central on that uprising, the Soweto uprising. The students fled to this Catholic church and for safety. But when they got there, the police were inside and they opened fire inside the church. This also became a church for some of the hearings for the Truth and Reconciliation work. And one of the things that I got to witness and observe is the picture to the right is the altar rail. And that they've kept a lot of the evidence of what happened that day so that people can come in and see it. The reason this is a marble altar, and it is broken because the students were pushed against it and trying to jump over it to get to safety, fleeing from the bullets, and it was broken. And so they keep that as a reminder of that day. You can also still see there have been arguments over whether it was live ammunition or not, but you can see the bullet holes, and that are very clearly live ammunition. This is on the left is Constitutional Court. We were able to go in and observe that as a spectator. I think if I remember correctly, the hearing was on water rights. And then of course, we also are spectators when we see pictures and photographs about how the past was lived. And the on the ground, which can be my favorite. This is where we get the stories and the relationships, and we have the experiences that help us see what's going on in the weeds. This is Auntie Betsy. I met her at the church service where I presided. She came up for her 90th birthday so we could celebrate it just like we do here. So she came forward along with a lot of other folks who asked for prayers. But we obviously bonded that we both had shared the name of Betsy. And those of you who know me, which you all do, it shouldn't surprise you that I made sure to find her right after at coffee hour. And I had to be dragged out of coffee hour. This is my friend Sia, who I met as part of the youth program in Fulmid. As we walked together through the township, he would point out, oh, those are my cousins over there. They're, doing this, or that's where I work, or he would tell me part of his story. And one of that was, you can't see in this picture, but he had a large scar across his nose. And a month prior to our visit, he had been slashed in a mugging in the township. And he was in the hospital for a week. And so he and I talked about what that was like coming back to the place where he, and I talked to him about how that changed his behavior. And it really didn't change his behavior much because that's where he lives and he has to do the things he has to do to live there. I also got to talk to him about his joy. And he said, if I don't have my joy, I have nothing left. Yeah, so winter, we were in August, so that's their winter moving into spring. Mm-hmm. On the right hand, I think, yeah, you're right too, is Mama Queen. she walked us around Soweto, and she was there on that day on the uprising. She was one of the protesters and walked us. She was our tour guide. And behind her, it's very hard to see in this image because we didn't know it at the moment, but there's a group behind her talking, and that is Hector Peterson's sister, who gives tours through daily about her experience that day in losing her brother. This is Anati on the left. Anati is a young woman who traveled with us to watch the 3 young children that were with us. But I think I learned the most from Anati while I was there. We had lots of opportunity to talk over meals and be together. And that's where I really understood the limitations in the upward mobility for children and youth like her. She told me she's very bright, graduated at the top of her class, told me how proud she was to graduate because it's not a given for these youth. And she said, and she wants to go to college, but to get into college, you have to know the right people. Even if you can find the money, which is very difficult, even if you have the grades, even if you've done a lot of things, you have to know the right person who's going to speak on your behalf. And so she's navigating her way through that. She's bright and incredibly talented. Elsie I met later, and I forgot my tutu doll. I can't believe it. And I'm not going to make Steve run out again. But you're all welcome to stop by my office and meet the Arch in my office. After I got back, I really wanted this Archbishop Desmond Tutu doll. You know where it is? Thank you. And this is Elsie. This was a story I got after the fact when I made some connections after I got home. And Elsie makes these dolls, and she has very limited mobility. So she makes the dolls, and others make sure that they can get out, and that's how she makes her money. But she's incredibly talented, and I'm very proud of my tutu doll. So here I want to share one of the experiences that happened with me. We spent the day with. I asked the question, how do you relate singing and dancing and to, I don't know why it's stopping. Singing and music to dance. And they said, oh, we got this for you. And so they started dancing. And when we got outside, oh no. You can hear one of the young women in the back go, swing it, girl. Oh, I'm so disappointed about that. Okay. And this is piece at one. Oh, I don't know why this is doing this. It was working on our trial runs. Yeah. Do you know why that's happening?
Yeah. To the dancing screen.
Yeah.
Escape out of presenter. So that you just have your slides. No.
Okay.
Drop out of Zoom.
Oh.
Okay. Oh, I can get this off now.
Right.
That's why I keep him around.
She can swing her hips, yes? Swing it, darling, swing it, yeah.
Thank you. This is Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and I was told by the folks that made it when I wrote back to them, and I said, oh my gosh, I love that he also is wearing a clergy shirt, so you can take off his cassock and you can see his clergy shirt. And she told me that he's authentic down to his underwear. And I have not looked. Somebody else looked and saw striped undies. I have not looked. So, and apparently he said that you can use my image as long as I have underwear. A man with a humor. And here, this is the piece given, oh, Steve, you're going to fix it this time too. This was the longest service I think I've ever been to. And I had no idea because it was so joyful. There was so much music. There was so much singing. There was so much dancing that 3 hours later, I looked down and I said, I felt really bad for the young kids that were with us because it was awful for them. But we had a good time. Now this is moving on its own, Steve. I don't know what it's doing. Okay. So on the wall or on the mirror door here, there is an inscription that you can't really see. It says, "A dream is not a dream until it is shared by the entire community." I saw our community that I traveled with walking reflected in that mirror, which is why I took the picture. And this is where the change comes. This entire community working together from all these different levels to envision a change, to speak the truth that they are witnessing from all these different levels so that we can make change for everybody. We saw this at the Freedom Park in Pretoria, in South Africa. You can see these little bricks on the wall. There's a name on each of those bricks, and that is someone who died, who gave their life. They may not have died in that fight, but they gave their life to the fight for justice and freedom. And they represent the world wars. So people in there are listed, people in apartheid, people in the Boer Wars, and they even have people from the different countries. So Martin Luther King is listed here on this wall. And back to my one of my best days, which was with the Full Med Youth Program that is designed to help these youth have some upward mobility in their worlds. They make these drums, and then they go around giving drum instruction and sharing their gift. They will be here in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, not here in, oh, I wish it was here in California, in the Midwest, and they will be traveling through the Midwest to share their gift with others. And I'm very excited for them because many of them have not been out of their township or in that vicinity. And then here we are at the Cathedral Church of St. Mary the Virgin in Johannesburg. Archbishop Desmond Tutu was the dean there at one time, and they are going to build Tutu Memorial Walk to remind people of him and what he stood for. One of the things that was said is we have to make sure that his life and legacy isn't sanitized to some small thing that he did, but that the robustness with which he fought for freedom, and he did that from his theological basis and relationship with God. And that is so important in his legacy that the two are not separated. Okay, so we've moved on now, and we're going to talk about the theological concept of Ubuntu, which means a person is a person through other people. And I want to, oh, no. Make sure that that goes back to the way it's supposed to. Okay. So this is what Desmond Tutu had to say. One of the sayings in our country is Ubuntu, the essence of being human. Ubuntu speaks particularly about the fact that you can't exist as a human being in isolation. It speaks about our interconnectedness. We think of ourselves far too frequently as just individuals separated from one another, whereas you are connected and what you do affects the whole world. When you do well, it spreads out. It is for the whole community. And we can also liken this to the Trinity. God cannot be God without somebody else to love. We cannot be Christian by ourselves without God and without others. We need the communion and the body. So this concept followed me throughout, and I kept coming back to this when I would say, why are we doing this? Why are we visiting the penguins? Why are we doing whatever we're doing? And every time I asked myself that question, I realized it was coming back to Ubuntu and understanding our connectedness to people, to God, and to creation. And so the next set of slides will be that. The first are about prayer and our relationship with God. This is Archbishop Tutu's personal chapel in his home, which we had the privilege of going into. It's not a museum yet. It's still set up just as when he was there. So it was an incredible privilege to walk through there. The next one is the labyrinth outside of the cathedral in Cape Town. I asked to walk this labyrinth, and one of our guides said, we won't have time. And the other guide said, it will be so because you have asked for it to happen. And so we did get the opportunity to walk this, which was incredibly meaningful to me, but we didn't have time for me to walk out of the labyrinth. And so if you've done a labyrinth, you walk in, and part of the process is walking out. And so that allowed me to reflect on what it means to enter something and never be able to leave. And that was incredibly powerful for this trip, and to think about that throughout this trip. This is at the Freedom Memorial, and it is a place of where all people can come and be close to God, whatever they call God. And you had to take off your shoes when you went down into this area and walk bare feet, which is kind of challenging because it's aggregate. It didn't feel good, but there's something about that too, because justice isn't pain-free. Yes. We find Ubuntu in community when we're praying together, through inviting people to come in to our community through baptism. Young Maggie got baptized while we were there. She was a member of our group, and so we got to experience this amalgam of a South African Anglican baptism and an American Episcopal Church baptism, which was kind of interesting to have a little bit of both. And this is the view of the gospel being read at the church where I presided. We also sense Ubuntu through creation, from the rising of the sun to the moon at night, through the land and through the things that grow on the land. South Africa, and especially the Western Cape, is known for its abundance of its flora and the number and variety of flora there. And it's called Fynbos. And we had a Fynbos lunch, and we got to learn about the things that grow there that sometimes that in many places were unknown of until a fire went through, and finally those things could grow again. We, of course, got to learn through the animals and observing the animals. If you were watching my my blog on Facebook, you saw a little video of a penguin walking away. They just made me laugh. And I got to learn that zebras are called, a group of zebras is called a dazzle. I thought that was great. I had to find a picture of a hippopotamus because that is Steve's favorite animal. And the cheetah was the animal that I wanted to see. And we did 3 game drives. And as we got on our last game drive, I was like, I just want to see a cheetah. Are we gonna get to see it? Actually, it's a leopard. They're hard to tell the difference. This is a leopard. And when we saw him, it was like we all just took a huge deep breath, and we were the first Jeep to come along it. So we were there before all these other Jeeps came along. And so we really got a special view of that. He is, which is, isn't that a great picture? I'm glad you noticed that, Dee. Yeah. And of course, we experience Ubuntu through other people. And the way we do this most often is through sharing meals with one another. And here at our Fynbos lunch, these three wonderful women shared a Pakistani proverb. With the first cup of tea, we are strangers. With the second cup, we are friends. And the third cup, we are family. And that's what happened to our group. We started as strangers, and by the end, we were a family with all the stuff that comes along with being a family. And here we see just a couple of pictures of how close we got to one another, people who were unrelated to begin with, and what we could share at the very end. I'm really hoping this next slide works, because this is the final slide coming up. So I'm gonna stop this. I hope it doesn't play on its own, and I hope it plays all the way through. It is a little bit long. I'm just going to let you know, it's 2 minutes long. We were at the last night. This was our last meal that we shared together. We were sitting at like banquet tables in a big U. And when you sit at tables like that, when you're along the edge, the conversations get weird, because you have a group of two, a group of two, a group of two. And if it doesn't even out, there are people who are excluded from that. And I was in one of those places. And even when people tried to include me, it got awkward. And I got really, really brave, and I had an idea. And so I said, okay, everyone, and this is after we had finished our meal, I want to teach you a song. Let's sing together. And so those of you who've been here during these times, we've sung the "Thank you for this day, God, thank you for this day." So we sang that together. I taught it to them, and then we allowed people to come up with things from the trip that they were thankful for. The kids, everybody. And then Anati, after I finished my song, said, I want to teach you a song too. And this is what I'm going to share with you. It's called I Love You. In Diaku Tanda means I love you, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit. I love you, Holy Spirit. We love you, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit. And then I have one more story to share with you when we finish. You can see even our servers joined in with us in singing. I'm going to stop that here. So while that's still going on a little bit, I can tell you the final story. So after we finished singing, and we didn't stop our singing here, we sang other songs. One of the two servers came over to me. His father died in the month prior to us being there. And when I started singing the song, Thank You for This Day, he realized that he needed to thank God, and that he was able to thank his father in singing that. And if that does not represent the theological concept of intimacy, I don't know what does, because that is the Holy Spirit. And so it's really lovely to end this both for the gift that I received that evening, and with the gift for this entire journey. Yes.
Since this was Cananana's second time,
Mm-hmm.
was it the same exact program?
It was the same exact program in the first part. The Cape Town part was the same, minus a few variations where things couldn't happen. One of the things she requested is she said that the story is incomplete because we didn't go to Soweto and Johannesburg and see what's going on up there and get to experience that. And so it was because of Canon Anna's desire for her sabbatical to experience that is now a permanent week that is on this journey. So before it was 1 week, and now it's a two week. Mm-hmm. And it happens twice a year. In January, and then in August, they do this ongoing travel Tutu Seminar. Ken.
In this presentation, you mentioned there's 22,000 victims.
Yes.
Chose the word victim.
Yes.
Does that mean what?
So it would be those who died in it, but those who were also harmed and affected. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you leave, if you leave your dishes on your chair or under your chair, I'll take care of them.
Oh, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken.
That's
Yeah. That's a boon too. That's a boon too.
Then can you come to my house?
Does anybody else have any questions? It's very warm in here. I am recognizing that. I don't know how warm you are. And I know this was long, but I'm willing to stay and answer your questions. I'm just really excited. Yes, I would go back. Mm-hmm.
Who was it that stopped you? For checking IDs and...
Yeah, so it was like the road, like it was the police that stopped us. But it was I never really quite understood why we were being stopped. And even the folks, our driver and Edwin, who was guiding us and lives there, not in Johannesburg, but knows about it. He's like, sometimes we have no idea why they're stopping us.
Did you feel threatened?
No, I did not feel threatened. Mm-mm.
Were the police white or black or?
That is a really good question. It's an excellent question, and I don't recall.
So they were
I don't
also
recall.
being police, they were on.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Andy.
The participants in this particular section of the Tutu Seminar, were they mixed race or were they mostly white Americans?
So the participants, Ken and Anna, me, our two guides are both Black. One is American, and a family, and I honestly, he's from the Caribbean and she is from Venezuela. And then their 3 children. And then the people that was with us, who we called Larry the Methodist. We found out very early on he was a Methodist, and so a Methodist pastor. And so he just got called affectionately Larry the Methodist the whole time. He was also white. Yeah.
I was just wondering if there was a difference in perception of it and experience between people of different backgrounds.
Yeah, we did talk about that a very little. And it was something that I actually wish we had talked about more, because I'm seeing it through my white eyes. And I was very, very aware of that. And especially after going through like the Apartheid Museum, I really wanted to have a conversation about that. If you've ever been to the Holocaust Museum, you get a ticket and you get a name. Here, you don't get a name, but you're told whether you're Black or you're white or you're colored, and then you go through a separate section to enter. So I wanted to know what that felt like through the eyes of those with us. And unfortunately, that conversation really didn't happen to a robust way where I could answer that for you. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So what ticket did you get going through the museum?
I was non-white. That's what it said.
Did you then get one that might have been a Black ticket, so you could go through, or,
So it was non-white, so I was Black or colored.
right?
And so I went through the path where I saw a lot of the registration, those registration cards. And I just went through that and saw things of what it would look like, of what my experience would be. Yeah.
So Betsy,
Yeah.
you gave us the kind of the timeframe when this started and
Mhm.
where they are today. Where are they in the process of getting to be where they should be?
I would say that a long ways.
Still a long way
Mhm.
away.
That was one of the gifts of being on this trip, both from the perspective of getting that bird's eye theoretical view, was having conversations when we were in a taxi and saying, tell us about your experience. Okay, well, I'm of Indian descent, and I still couldn't move out of my where I live. And I can't see a time when I would be able to do that, even though things are better for me right now. They're not so much better that I could have mobility to move to a different area. And then there's the question of, would I want to move to a different area? Because this is my community. So once you move to another community, then you are the outsider of that community. I mean, we understand this. We've seen this. Yeah. So I would say a long way. And they look to America, to the United States, as the place that will give them the hope. And that worries me.
No, it just should enthuse you to do more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because people that created apartheid looked to America, to the American South, and they learned, they imitated Jim Crow.
Mhm.
We're all in the healing journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've read some of our own. We didn't have to import. My family's from Oklahoma and Texas. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing everything.
Yes. Yeah.
It's, like you said, hard to sink 2 weeks down into an
I know.
hour.
I know.
Help us understand part of your journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
I bet you have to be good friends with.
Thank you.